If you're looking for a high-performance gaming laptop within a compact design, several 14-inch gaming laptops have been gradually gaining popularity. I've gathered 6 of them here, and I think these are some of the best options currently available. I've reviewed some of them here on the channel already, but there are some others that still need to be covered, so I thought it might as well just be a great opportunity to gather them all and combine them into a single roundup video. Now, I wasn't able to go out and get every single 14-inch gaming laptop on the market from every manufacturer. That would have taken an eternity. So we're basically working with what we have here. So what's so special about 14-inch gaming laptops? Well, the first thing is, of course, portability, right? I mean, these things are smaller, they're lighter, they're easier to carry around, and they also feature really good specs underneath the hood. So we have new CPUs from AMD, Intel, and they also come paired with some really fast GPUs like RTX 4060s and 4070s, although the power levels are obviously not quite on par to their expensive, bigger 16-inch chassis. So that's something to consider. But if you're a student and if you just need something that's portable, but you also want that performance to back you up when you just want to game for 20-30 minutes between classes, sure, I mean, these are pretty good options. We have 6 contenders for this roundup, starting with the Legion Slim 5. I'm going to be completely transparent with you guys. I didn't even know this thing existed until some of you guys pointed it out in the comments, so thank you very much. And it was very hard to source a sample for this roundup, but I'm glad that it's here. Basically, it's a Legion 5 series crammed into a 14-inch chassis. And then we have the Acer Helios Neo 14. This is a smaller version of the Neo 16, but it's packed with pretty good specs. And then we have the ROG Zephyrus G14. This one doesn't need any particular introduction. It is ROG's best 14-inch gaming laptop. And then we have the Asus TUF A14. Think of this as the budget version of the G14, but it's got a catch that makes the G14 a tough sell, but we'll get into that later. Then we have the HP Omen Transcend 14. This is HP's response to the 14-inch gaming laptop market, and they've stepped up big time with the design and some really cool features that makes you wonder why other manufacturers haven't followed suit. And finally, we have the Razer Blade 14. As always, it is the most expensive out of the bunch. Now, I should mention that while some of the specs inside these laptops might not be the latest and greatest, they're still highly capable machines. So in this video, we'll have a mix of Intel and AMD options from various manufacturers. We have Strix Point, Hawk Point, Phoenix, and Meteor Lake. So a really good selection of CPUs. And the GPUs on most of these laptops are 4060s and 4070s. I think the best way to approach this video is by ranking these laptops by tiers based on each segment. So things like build quality, keyboard and trackpad, ports and displays. We'll get into the performance stuff later, but the majority of this video is going to be based on just the user experience and how it is like to handle every day. So S tier is the absolute best, followed by A, B, and C, which is the least impressive feature. But before we dive in, a quick word from today's video sponsor.
The new Antec Flux Pro is an absolute win of a full tower with tasteful design elements that don't scream for attention but are perfectly mature to stand out among copycat cases. And you know Antec will include fantastic out-of-the-box airflow with 6 fans and proper shroud ventilation to help your GPU breathe better. It's not just a gimmick but a clever use of a 90-degree power supply mount that actually helps with cable management at the same time. This case was clearly designed by PC builders to make your journey as pleasant as possible and is one of my favorite full towers right now. Check it out below.
Okay, so let's start with the build quality of these laptops, starting with the Legion Slim 5. I have to say, I really love this onyx gray finish. It is definitely a nice departure from the standard black materials that we're used to seeing on gaming laptops. It's a super clean, minimal design. I mean, I've always appreciated Legion's design ID over the past few generations, though it is slightly getting a bit dated. This definitely looks like a previous generation Legion 5 series, but I still like it because, for instance, I love the ports set up at the back. It makes cable routing a lot easier, and it's also super lightweight. It comes in around 0.84 inches and it weighs about 3.86 pounds, so it's very lightweight to carry. The build quality is also really good since the top and bottom panels are made out of aluminum, and I also appreciate the smaller details, like this top lid, for example, is smaller than the bottom deck, and this just makes opening the lid with one hand a lot easier, and it's more friendly to use as well. And you also have a webcam kill switch on the side, which is a really thoughtful feature as well. It does come with a 170 watt power supply, and it charges over Lenovo's proprietary connector, and it supports rapid charge, which is really nice. So overall, it's a very compact setup for students and just anyone looking for something small. The Helios Neo 14 follows a similar structure to the Legion Slim 5 because you do get this extension in the back. However, the ports are not located at the back. It's just strictly for cooling purposes, like exhausting all that heat. But I have to say, this design is very similar to Acer's previous generations. There's, again, nothing really new. It does have a lot of gamer aesthetics going on for it. For example, you get this really massive Predator logo tucked away at the top that can be customized through software, and then you have some PCB traces etched to the front lid. But I have to say, the entire chassis uses a lot of plastic materials, especially this bezel over here is just some cheap material which doesn't reflect its price point. And I have to say, while it is put together pretty well, it definitely isn't quite up to standard like the Legion Slim 5. I should also mention that this black material over here picks up a lot of fingerprints, so if you like to keep your things clean, this one's going to be really hard to maintain. And it also weighs slightly heavier than the Slim 5. Plus, the included power brick is the biggest of this roundup. It is a 230 watt power supply. Just dropped my phone. And the cable is also the longest. As you can see, it just keeps going and going and going. So yeah, it's a very long cable. I don't think you'll have to worry about reaching power plugs or anything like that because this is more than what you can expect from a traditional power supply. Moving on, we have the ROG Zephyrus G14. This is the thinnest and lightest laptop in this roundup. It's only 0.64 inches thin and 3.3 pounds, so super portable friendly. And I think Asus just stepped up the design and build quality with the G14 with this particular generation. So they've used an entire chassis that's made out of CNC milled aluminum. And I also love the little attention to details, like this lid, for instance, is magnetized, so it has a really nice satisfying sound when you close it, and you can also open it with one hand easily. Hinge is a little bit on the wobbly side, but I do appreciate the fact that you're getting thinner bezels, and you also get this really unique slash lighting on the front that can be customized through software. The included power supply is also super slim. It's a 180 watt unit, and it charges the laptop via Asus's proprietary DC slim jack, which is reversible as well. So overall, a super portable friendly package. The Tough A14 is what I would call the minimalist choice because it's super understated. I love the stealthy design. It is made out of a combination of metal and plastic materials, but it's put together really well. In fact, it's better, I would say built better than the Acer Neo Helios 14. You get a few design accents like this tough logo that's laser etched to the corner over here, but other than that, it's super clean design. And surprisingly, the form factor is remarkably close to the G14. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, this is just a budget version of the G14. It's not using the exact same chassis, but from a form factor standpoint, it's very similar. It's 0.78 inches thin, and it weighs around 3.22 pounds, which is slightly heavier and slightly thicker than the G14. And this hinge opens all the way up to 180 degrees flat, which is kind of cool. It does exhibit a little bit of wobble, but nothing too worrying. And the included power supply is pretty compact. It's slightly more power hungry than the G14, so it's a 200 watt unit, but it still uses the same slim DC jack like the G14. The Omen Transcend 14 is something that I've been waiting to get my hands on. It was announced back at CES, but I'm just glad that I'm finally getting to play around with this thing. And I have to say, HP definitely stepped up the design on this laptop compared to the previous generation. You can see that they've taken a slightly different direction. For instance, the corners are slightly more rounded, and the build quality is definitely a huge improvement. So the top, bottom, the entire chassis looks like it's made out of CNC milled aluminum. So it's very much on par with the G14 and the Blade 14 from Razer. You can pick this up in black or ceramic white. Unfortunately, this black model loves fingerprints, so you just have to make sure to clean it every now and then. And I also love the two ports located at the back for quick cable routing. I mean, it's HDMI and USB for power, but yeah, I just love that implementation. It's super sleek and kind of tucked away in the corner or at the back, just to make it easier for users. But there are some design choices that are questionable. For example, if I look at the keyboard, it just looks as if somebody applied a keyboard cover on top and just called it a day. It looks like a sore thumb, in my opinion. But yeah, overall though, from a design standpoint, I love what HP has done with the Transcend 14. It's super lightweight, very comparable to G14, very thin as well. Oh, and before I forget, one of the coolest additions to the Transcend 14 is their partnership with HyperX. So the Transcend 14 comes with a built-in 2.4 GHz ultra low latency receiver that lets you pair the HyperX Cloud 3 wireless gaming headset. Now you can configure this laptop and order it so that this comes included as a bundle. Essentially, There's no need for a dongle or anything like that. It actually ends up freeing up a USB port. All I have to do is just power the headset and it just automatically pairs to this laptop and it works like a charm. Though I will say that I did run into a few instances where when I disconnect from the headphones and try to play off of the speakers, there's just no output whatsoever. So I think that's a bit of a glitch and it requires a reboot to fix that. Other than that, we have a super compact 140 watt power supply and it charges the laptop via USB Type-C and it supports fast charge. The Blade 14 isn't anything new here. It's the best built gaming laptop that's close to the G14 and the Omen 14. The design isn't anything different from the past. You still get this matte black finish with edgy corners. I'm gonna admit, that can get quite uncomfortable when typing for longer periods of time. It also attracts a lot of fingerprints. Honestly, there's nothing new with the Blade series this year. It is a fairly compact laptop coming in at 0.7 inches and it weighs around 4 pounds. The power adapter is compact, though I'm not a fan of the braided cable. So if we were to classify the build quality and ergonomics of these laptops in tiers, the Blade 14, G14 and the Slim 5 get S tier, followed by the HP Omen Transcend 14 for A tier, simply because the keyboard finish just doesn't look quite polished.
And then I'm going to put the Tough A14 into B tier and the Acer Helios Neo 14 into C tier.
Now, if we switch to keyboards, I think Legion makes some of the best laptop keyboards on the market. The keys have less play. They offer great feedback. It is a well-rounded option for gaming and writing out emails. You also get a fingerprint sensor with the power button, which is a nice integration. You also get some cool shortcuts to change the performance modes by using Function plus Q, and also Function plus R changes the refresh rate from 120 Hz to 60 Hz to preserve battery life. The Slim 5 doesn't come with RGB lighting, but instead you get the standard white LEDs. But I did wish if they found a way to block out all this spill coming out of the edges of the keycaps. The trackpad features a glass surface. It's just super easy for navigation. And overall, I think this is a well-rounded option for productivity and gaming. The keyboard on the Neo 14 is my least favorite out of this roundup because the switches, they feel mushy, they lack travel, and it looks like Acer's using some cheap springs for these switches. So I think these are satisfactory. You do get some dedicated keys on the right-hand side, like access to Predator Sense, mic mute, and playback controls, though I did wish if they included volume controls instead of that. The RGB lighting is nice and bright, but keep in mind that it's 3-zone only, so you can't customize the keys individually. The trackpad it's all right. The surface isn't as smooth as a precision glass surface. I feel like Acer is using the same recipe over and over again with their gaming laptops. I haven't seen any improvements with the build quality, particularly with the keyboard, the trackpad, and just the rest of the chassis over the past few years. And that's a bit of a disappointment considering the price tag. I have to say, with this generation of the G14, it lacks solidity when you bottom out on the key compared to the previous generation G14. It also feels like it lacks travel, but it gets a job done for both gaming and productivity focused tasks. It's probably the second best keyboard in this roundup when you combine this massive trackpad with a precision glass surface. That's just a beautiful experience to use overall through Windows. The inputs, they feel snappy, they're responsive, and that's what ultimately leads to a better user experience. And while it does come with RGB lighting, I feel like it clashes with the white keycaps simply because they just don't go well together in a bright lit environment. So that's something to keep note of. You do get dedicated keys right at the top here for access to volume controls, mic mute, and Armory Crate. Okay, so Tough A14. This might come as a surprise, but I think this laptop has the best keyboard in this roundup. The keys have more travel without any play. I like the way how they bottom out during intense gaming sessions. It's just so solid. It has a very satisfying tactile feel. I'm not a fan of the typography on the keycaps, but that's okay. It doesn't feature RGB, but that's also okay because it's a basic keyboard that gets a job done. For the price, you really can't complain. But above all of that, I love the inclusion of a glass trackpad. That is something that you don't necessarily see on laptops within this price point, gaming laptops more specifically. So overall, it's just a really nice experience using the keyboard and the trackpad. This is just an awesome combination. With the Omen Transcend 14, I'm not particularly fond of this dual tone finish with the keyboard. The RGB lighting lacks proper diffusion. You can actually see the individual LEDs underneath. This design choice detracts from the overall aesthetic, giving a laptop a cheap and unrefined appearance. The typography is also inconsistent as well. I mean, the backspace font looks completely different from the main letters. It also is a 4-zone lighting system, so you can't individually control the color of each key. But on the positive side, these switches are remarkably solid. They offer a really good amount of travel distance, excellent tactile feedback for a really nice typing experience for both gaming and productivity focused tasks. The trackpad is also really good, although I did notice that it skipped left clicks when I'm selecting and moving items across the screen, so that's something to keep note of. And with the Blade 14, I have to say the first thing that stands out to me is chroma lighting. It is probably the best looking out there. But the keyboard feels shallow and it lacks feedback. The keycaps are slightly smaller than the other models. Razer has included shortcuts for changing the refresh rate, disabling trackpad, and cycling between performance modes using the function key. I do love this glass trackpad. It is, again, one of the best in the market. It's pretty much on par with the G14 and the TUF A14. And if we were to categorize the keyboard and trackpads for these laptops, the TUF A14 gets S tier,
followed by the Legion Slim 7i and the ROG Zephyrus G14 as A tier. And then for B tier, we have the HP Omen 14 Transcend and the Razer Blade 14. And finally in C tier, we're going to put the Acer Helios Neo 14.
All these laptops are loaded with ports. If you need USB Type-A, USB Type-C, and HDMI, these laptops tick those boxes. The G14, TUF A14, and Neo 14 come with micro SD card readers. Not sure how useful that is for gamers, but it would have been nice if they gave us an extra USB port instead of that. The Legion Slim 5 comes with a full-size SD card slot, but unfortunately it's not UHS 2 compliant, so it's not ideal for content creators. The Intel laptops, like the Neo 14 and the Omen 14, come with Thunderbolt support, but I was surprised to find that the G14 comes with Gen 1 Type-A ports. These are rated for 5 gigabits per second versus 10 gigabits per second, which is basically featured on all the other laptops. So it's not really future-proof. And it also comes with HDMI 2.0B instead of HDMI 2.1. So you can't really push high refresh rate displays with that HDMI port. So you have to rely on the USB-C port with DisplayPort outputs. So all these laptops get S-tier status except for the G14 since it's running slightly outdated specs. Now, if we look at webcam quality, the G14 and the Legion Slim 5 have the best image quality overall with good balance of dynamic range and sharpness. The Omen 14 had trouble exposing for my face, and you can tell that because it really can't calibrate for the pink screwdriver that I'm holding. The same goes for the Blade 14. The TUF A14 and the Neo 14 were the worst in the roundup. You get washed out colors, lack of sharpness and dynamic range, so yeah, not ideal for conference calls in my opinion. So these are how I would classify them from a tier perspective. If you're looking for a 14-inch gaming laptop with the best sounding speakers, look no further than the ROG Zephyrus G14 and the Razer Blade 14. They both feature front-facing drivers. The sound quality is really good. I would say the G14 has a slight edge over the Blade 14 because it has drivers not only in the front, but they've also positioned them on the side and the back as well. So it's really pronounced, a lot of clarity. The bass response is pretty good as well. Everything else is pretty bad. I would classify these as C tier because, there are bottom-facing drivers, so the sound quality is definitely not, I guess you can't really compare them to the Blade 14 and the G14. It's just muffled and there's no bass. You're much better off using a pair of headphones with all these other laptops. Switching to displays, all these laptops come with 16:10 screens. They either have QHD Plus or above, like 3K, and they feature 120Hz, 165Hz, or 240Hz refresh rates. The G14, Omen Transcend 14, and the Legion Slim 5 come with OLED displays at 120Hz, so you can expect those rich colors and inky blacks that we're used to seeing on smartphones. The Blade 14, Neo 14, and the TUF A14 feature IPS level panels. Now, you can't really go wrong with either of these displays. They're amazing for gaming. The high refresh rate paired with really good colors, it's awesome. The color accuracy in all these panels are really good, with the exception of the Neo 14 because it features a delta E value of 1.42. Remember, the lower the number, the better the color accuracy. To the naked eye, it might not look that bad, but if you're trying to get into some creative work where you want to match those reference colors, you want to pick a display with lower delta E values. And that's where the G14, the Blade 14, Slim 5, and the Omen definitely are good options. Brightest panel in this roundup goes to the Razer Blade 14, followed by the Neo 14. When you look at the OLED options, while they do offer really good colors, the max output is only about 413 nits of peak SDR performance, so outdoor visibility is certainly going to be a challenge with the G14, the Omen 14, and the Legion Slim 5. Plus, they're also super glossy as well, so they don't have any anti-reflective coatings. So if we're to classify the displays of these laptops in tiers, the Blade 14 gets S tier, hands down, followed by G14, Omen 14, and Legion Slim 5 as A tier, and then we have the Neo 14 and the TUF A14 as B tier. Now, if we look at upgradability, unfortunately, when you try to downsize, you are going to make some compromise on accessibility. For example, None of these laptops, except for the Razer Blade 14, have upgradable memory. They're all soldered onto the PCB, so what you configure on the website or what you get online retailer, that's what comes with the rest of its lifespan. So that's unfortunate. I really wish we had access to memory configuration, but the Blade 14, it's surprising what Razer was able to do with that machine. You can configure that with up to 96 gigabytes of memory, which is kind of insane, but if you need it, it's there. But there are some honorable mentions. For example, the TUF A14 and the Legion Slim 5 feature two M.2 slots, so you can expand the storage, whereas all the other laptops feature only a single M.2 drive, and that's pretty much it. So if I were to classify the upgradability list for these laptops, ROG Zephyrus G14, HP Omen Transcend 14, Acer Helios Neo 14 gets C tier, and then we have Legion Slim 5 and Asus TUF A14 as B tier, and then we have the Razer Blade 14 topping out with S tier status. All these laptops come equipped with really fast drives, but I was surprised to see how far behind the G14 and the TUF 14 are compared to the rest of the laptops in this roundup. Now, this is likely due to their use of a mid-tier SN560 SSD from Western Digital, but yeah, for the price you pay, I'm sure Asus could have done better. Okay, so now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of this video, performance. We're comparing a variety of CPUs in different laptops in their highest performance setting. So Intel's Meteor Lake processors in the Helios 14 and the Omen Transcend 14, AMD's Phoenix in the Slim 5, Hawkpoint in the G14 and the Blade 14, and Strixpoint in the TUF A14. The performance difference between AMD's Phoenix and Hawkpoint CPUs is very minimal, but Strixpoint, like the HX370 in the TUF A14, is a huge improvement. And this is due to the new Zen 5 architecture, giving AMD a significant performance boost. On the Intel side, the Core i9 185H in the Neo 14 is close in performance to the TUF A14, but power settings play a crucial role. For instance, the Omen Transcend 14 is limited to running at 64 watts, so it struggles to match the performance of the other laptops in this roundup. Interestingly, the HX370 in the TUF A14 and the Ryzen 9 8945HS in the Blade 14 delivers similar performance, despite the TUF A14 being nearly $1,000 cheaper. For editing tasks in Premiere and Resolve, these laptops perform similarly since their GPUs, which is a mix of RTX 4060s and 4070s, handle most of the workload. Now, just like in every other laptop review that I mentioned, power plays an important role over specs. Just because you see something with a 4070 or 4080 doesn't mean it's guaranteed to give you the best gaming performance. If lower power levels hold it back, you're essentially leaving a lot of performance on the table. In this case, we have 3 laptops with RTX 4060s and 3 laptops with RTX 4070s. And right off the bat, at 1080p, the ROG Zephyrus G14 falls short, despite it rocking an RTX 4070. It cleanly gets beaten by the RTX 4060s running in the Legion Slim 5 and the TUF A14, since their power readings are much higher compared to the G14, and they're cheaper too. There are some instances where it comes ahead due to 50% more shaders, but I wanted to shift your focus towards the Helios Neo 14 because this laptop, for its price, delivers incredible gaming performance, almost matching the Razer Blade 14, and it's the only laptop that's pushing its GPU power levels past 115 watts. The Omen Transcend 14 is unfortunately the worst performer in this roundup since it's only being fed with 50 watts in its highest performance mode, and for $1,800, that's a tough pill to swallow. Sure, the design is refreshing, but everything else is falling apart. Switching to 1440p, the results were varied. The Neo 14 falls behind in Counter-Strike 2, but it outperforms the Blade 14 in Doom Eternal by a huge amount. Despite power limitations, the G14 holds its ground, while the Legion Slim 5 takes the lead in Red Dead Redemption 2. But out of all these laptops, I'm surprised at how well that Asus TUF A14 kept up the more expensive models. In contrast, the Omen Transcend 14 continues to underperform. If we look at acoustic performance, the Neo 14 is the loudest laptop in this roundup, and that is the trade-off that you get when you consider all the performance that you're getting. And the Omen Transcend 14 is the quietest, but that's no surprise because there's not a lot of power being fed into this thing. The last thing to look over here is battery life. The TUF A14 and G14 led our light load test, leaving the rest of the laptops far behind thanks to Asus's power efficiency and optimizations. Despite having the largest battery, the Neo 14 struggled to exceed 9 hours of battery life in our YouTube playback test. The Neo 14 slightly edges out the G14, but the TUF A14 remains the top performer with its Zen 5C cores working efficiently, running at lower clock speeds. Strixpoint is the best thing that has ever happened to AMD, period. On the other hand, The Blade 14 fares the worst, lasting just over 6 hours, making frequent access to a power outlet essential. In heavier tasks, the G14 takes lead with the tough A14 holding steady in the middle, while the Slim 5 runs out of power first. Alright, so I know this has been a long video, but I'm going to keep this short. I think initially when you look at brands like Razer, which was the go-to brand for premium 14-inch gaming laptops, even the earlier G14 models with the 5000, 6000 series just couldn't compete. But now, it feels like most of the other brands have caught up, or even surpassed what Razer has to offer, because they haven't just innovated that much. The current generation G14 feels like a premium device with a premium price, but the tough A14 is incredibly close in performance at a much better price point, especially with its Zen 5 processor. It's clear that Asus is targeting the Legion Slim 5 before Lenovo can release a stronger competitor. I feel like the Legion Slim 5 is the price to performance king, and Lenovo offers great warranty extensions, but I do feel like this design is looking a little bit dated. If they can do something about the design here to make it look something like the recent Slim line, the entire market will be put on notice that there's probably a new 14-inch later in town. The Omen Transcend 14. Oh man, where do I start? It's surprising, not because it's a god-tier device, but because of how much has improved from the previous generation in terms of build quality and design. The pricing is a little out of whack considering the awful performance you're getting, but I have to commend them for the inclusion of the HyperX Cloud 3 series wireless headset. It's a really nice integration, but I think this is something that you should definitely avoid because, yeah, for the price, it ain't worth it. The Helios Neo 14 is a solid option offering an RTX 4070 at the price of laptops with RTX 4060s. It's also widely available and could become a great Black Friday deal at retailers like Best Buy. But I still feel like this design is outdated. I feel like Acer needs to go back to the drawing board and come up with something unique. Plus, there are so many aspects of this laptop that still needs improvement, like the keyboard and most importantly, the fan noise. It's just so loud under gaming. In my opinion, this roundup shows how much current generation laptops have improved. I'd actually recommend spending a bit more on a 2024 model rather than opting for a discounted 2023 version. It's not just about performance, but rather the quality of life improvements that some of these laptops bring to the table. Now, you could choose to wait for 2025 models since it'll be getting new CPUs paired with new GPUs, and that typically takes a while to get sorted because the BIOS, firmware, and driver updates need to be polished, at least in a few months, if not a lot more. It's sort of like the gremlins that arise with newer car models. You never buy a first-generation car. So while waiting for Arrow Lake H and RTX 5000 might feel like the right move, I would suggest avoiding it initially. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.